Known to the general public only as the In-N-Out Bandit, Tom Dolan has orchestrated 8 successful bank robberies in the past 6 years without the police ever suspecting him. He is at a storage facility one day when he meets Annie Wilkins, a psychology grad student who works there. After a year of being together, Tom suggests moving in together and buying a house. Reassured that she won't have to go through the pain of divorce again, Annie agrees. Blissful as she is, she, however, does not know the full reality of Tom's life. Intending to lead an honest life with her, though, Tom calls the FBI the next morning to turn himself in. Speaking to Special Agent Sam Baker, Tom details his work as the In-N-Out Bandit and mentions having robbed 12 banks in 7 states amounting to over $9 million. Baker and his partner Sean Myers listen in together as Tom offers to make a deal entailing him handing over all the cash he stole in return for a reduced sentence. Proving his need for an honest life with Annie, he requests not more than 2 years in a minimum security prison near the city with full visitation rights. Assuring him that he will do his best, Baker arranges to meet with Tom at the Charleston Hotel the next day. Since the FBI has been steadily getting several confessions about the In-N-Out Bandit, Baker refuses to believe this one is true and instead hands over the file to his colleagues, Special Agents John Nivens and Ramon Hall. Not having heard from anyone for 2 days, Tom calls to speak with Baker but gets to Myers instead, who informs him about Baker being out for the day. He also informs Tom about his case being assigned to 2 other agents. John and Ramon meet Tom just then, who also do not seem to believe that Tom is indeed the In-N-Out Bandit. When asked to provide specific details about the robberies to prove his identity, he mentions that he primarily targeted small-town banks that use vaults from before the 1950s. More importantly, he says that he needed a vacant building next to the bank with which it shares a wall. He also adds that all the robberies took place on Friday nights and that he entered the banks through a vent. Patiently drilling through the vault, then he used gelignite for the bolts. After gathering the cash, he then covered his tracks by patching the wall up. The agents both make to leave when Tom mentions his deal for a reduced sentence. Ramon tells him that while they will try and verify the details he provided, they cannot agree to a deal without actually seeing the cash that Tom says he stole as the In-N-Out Bandit. Tom then gives them the address of the storage facility where he has stashed the cash and offers to go along when Ramon insists on getting the key and checking it out on their own instead. John and Ramon then get to Tom's storage unit and sort through the things there while still refusing to believe Tom's story. Their stance changes, however, when they find the cash there and they finally realize that Tom was being honest about everything. John's greed and corrupt mind lead him to confiscate stolen property, not for evidence, as Ramon expects it to be, but for their personal use instead. Principled as he is, Ramon refuses to cart off with the money while John attempts to convince him for the sake of no more mortgage payments and better schooling for Raymond's children. Finally swayed, he agrees while Tom waits for them to get back. As it turns out, Annie meets the agents at the storage unit where they introduce themselves as Tom's friends and provide fake names. Assuming that they worked together in the Marines earlier, she asked whether Tom was moving into the house they looked at. Happy when John and Ramon agree with her, she gets on her way. Later, John and Ramon get to a company-safe house to hide the cash away, while Myers tells Baker about Tom's call, which leads to him assuming that nobody followed up on the case. Ignoring Baker's call, John secretly arms himself even as Annie leaves the storage facility to meet Tom at the hotel. John and Ramon then get back to Tom and confirm that they found the cash. Held at gunpoint then, Tom asked if they counted the cash and reveals that it was only $3 million as compared to the 9 he said they would find. Just as John asks about the remaining money, Baker gets there. Deciding to keep their plan from Baker, John lowers his gun and Ramon lets him in. When Baker notices the gun though, John shoots him before Tom crashes out of the window with him. Falling right in Annie's path with John, Tom urges her away to safety. John and Ramon then chase them through the city as Ramon reveals that Tom swiped his weapon. A shocked Annie demands answers from Tom and he promises to give them to her once they are safe. Coming across Tom's abandoned car after a while, John and Ramon look around the place hoping to nab him but are unsuccessful. Unknown to them, they drive past a parked car in which Tom hides with Annie. Once they leave, Tom comes clean about his identity to Annie and assures her that he hasn't been on the wrong side of the law since he has been with her. Forced to rethink everything about the man she has known for the past year, Annie demands to know the reason for him choosing to rob banks. Giving her the whole story then, Tom says that it began when his father lost his job as a welder in the company that he had worked for more than 35 years. Additionally, the CEO of the company embezzled money from the pension fund of the employees and denied his father his rightful pension. Coupled with the sheer inability to deal with the loss of Tom's mother, he says that his father didn't take it up with lawyers but instead ended it all. Tom then robbed the bank where the CEO held his money a month later. He says that since he didn't spend any of it, he continued robbing banks purely for the thrill it posed. He also adds that meeting her made him realize that he cared for love more than money or an adrenaline rush. Back at the Charleston Hotel, Myers grieves the loss of his partner and vows to find the person responsible for his passing. Meanwhile, Tom informs Annie about possibly being charged with Baker's end and insists that she gets away from the city to avoid being taken in as his accomplice in the act. Exactly as per Tom's anticipation, John lies to Myers about losing Baker before they got to Tom and insists that they didn't find anything at the storage unit either. Meanwhile, Tom drops Annie off at the bus station with the assurance that they will meet again. The next morning, Myers, John, and Ramon look into Tom's file, which they were able to access through a fingerprint they lifted from his hotel room. Having picked Annie's identity from a camera outside the hotel, they also discuss about her divorce, which happened a few years ago. Hoping that she would know Tom's whereabouts, Myers instructs them to look for her. Meanwhile, having got off the bus, Annie calls Tom from the storage facility and informs him about the security footage of John and Ramon taking boxes out of his storage unit. She says that she came back because the recording writes over itself every 2 days and she couldn't lose the crucial evidence. While he asks her to leave immediately, she isn't fast enough since John gets there just then. As he questions Annie about the remaining money, Tom speeds through traffic to get to her in a stolen van. When she tries to escape though, John hits her and looks for the memory card of the security footage. Annie somehow manages to stab John with a pair of scissors, but she is unable to get too far. Seeing the struggle against the locked door, Ramon rushes in only to find an unconscious Annie. He stops John from finishing her off for good and eventually urges him to leave the place before being found. After they leave, Tom gets there and rushes Annie to the hospital. Hurrying out of the hospital himself upon seeing the police there, Tom then calls the FBI and speaks to John through Myers. When John feigns not knowing about Annie, Tom warns him about the danger he plans to be for him before disconnecting the call. Intrigued upon learning about Annie, Myers mentions heading over to the hospital to check on her, much to John's disappointment. Meanwhile, Tom gets chased by the local police in addition to Ramon and John. Parking behind a bunch of bushes, however, he manages to avoid the police, and when he sees Ramon and John get there, he backs the van up and rams into their car on purpose. Unable to get out of the car due to the crash, John repeatedly shoots at Tom's van and Tom returns the favor right back. Driving away then, Tom abandons the van just as Myers spots him and proceeds to pursue him as he attempts to get away on foot. Eventually, having to follow on foot as well, Myers comes across Tom, who tackles him and assures him that he did not cause Baker's end. Admitting that John is the culprit, Tom adds that John attacked Annie as well. Urging Tom to do the right thing, Myers suggests getting taken in and assures him to be brought to justice. Unwilling to do so, however, Tom returns Raymond's weapon to Myers and escapes to do the right thing in his own way. From his hotel room later that evening, he contacts the hospital he left Annie at and learns that while she cannot talk at the moment, she will certainly get better soon. On the other hand, John gets to the hospital to ensure that she doesn't live to tell the tale. However, Myers' presence in her room gets him to flee to avoid being caught. The next morning, Myers questions John about his opinion regarding Tom's story and also asks about where the stolen money is. Choosing to hide everything he knows, John insists that Tom is lying about the money in addition to the story he has made around it. Handing over Raymond's weapon then, Myers simply dismisses them both. While John remains determined to continue down the path of corruption, Ramon is fearful of Myers catching up to their lies. Later that night, Tom follows Ramon home from work. Breaking in, he attacks Ramon and urges him to do the right thing and help him prove his innocence. An honest family man at heart, Ramon tells Tom that he discreetly took the security footage of the storage facility from Annie, which John does not know about. He also suggests that he get her out of the hospital if he wants to save her life. This gets Tom to rush over to the hospital and sneak Annie out to the safety of his hotel room. He contacts Myers in the morning to clear Annie from being involved in any of his activities. Back in his hotel room later, he puts together an explosive and Annie insists on accompanying him the next morning. Waiting some distance away from John's house, Tom calls him demanding a confession for his crimes and threatens him by counting down from 10. John rushes out of his house just in time before it goes up in flames. Tom then hands over the security footage he got from Ramon to Annie and asks for her help to get it to Myers. Meanwhile, John arrives at the safe house and asks Ramon to join him there. Myers meets Annie at the storage facility meanwhile and gets the security footage from her. Additionally, she also opens an adjacent storage unit and reveals the rest of the stolen cash, which she says Tom wanted him to know about in good faith. Back at the safe house, Ramon pretends to be held at gunpoint by Tom, who then informs John about getting the security footage. Disappointed by his partner's betrayal, an enraged John doesn't realize that he is being riled up by Ramon on purpose and inadvertently agrees to have ended Baker. However, his confession takes an extremely violent turn when John shoots Ramon to his end and then attacks Tom as well. The two exchange fire till John escapes with the cash, leaving an injured Tom behind. Tracking John's progress, Tom contacts him to let him know about having placed a pressure-sensitive explosive under his car's seat beforehand, implying that he cannot get out of the car. Suggesting that he call the bomb squad for assistance, Tom then retrieves the recorder with John's confession from Raymond's corpse. Eventually, the pressure-sensitive explosive in John's car is revealed to have no detonator, much to his relief. However, Myers has him arrested immediately for trying to escape with stolen cash. Returning to his office, Myers finds the recorder with John's confession of being responsible for his partner's passing. Meeting Annie later that evening, he speaks to Tom and appreciates his method of taking John down. Nonetheless, still willing to take responsibility for his wrongdoings and hoping for a better life in the future, Tom turns himself in. Finally believing that the In-N-Out bandit truly wants to live an honest life, Myers promises to do everything he can to have Tom's sentence reduced. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have any movies you'd like recapped, drop them down below, and as always, have a good one.